Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah. I'm here with Dr. Robin Graham, who is now a brand strategist, but she is also an expert in anxiety. And if you have lived through the pandemic or lived through the last 2 years or, had a human, you've probably experienced either worry or anxiety or some type of perma-stress. I heard an article or I saw an article recently and it said the last 3 years have been like perma-stress for
Mhm.
each of us. So, welcome, Robin. I know we are happy to talk about you and your book. Thanks for coming.
Well, thanks for having me, Sarah. It's an honor to be here, and hopefully, I'll shed some light to your listeners and help them navigate anxiety or the world of anxiety, whether it's themselves or their children or even another loved one that could be trickling down into their life as well. So,
So, how do you recognize either anxiety in someone you care about? Because I know you've done a lot of conversation about teens, right? Which is a
right.
huge issue. What did you say the statistics were for teens and anxiety right now?
Oh gosh. Well, the prevalence increased over 25% over the past 2 years. So, and we were teens, somewhere between 30 and 40% of the teen population has anxiety or experiences anxiety. Um, a lot of times what will happen when your child may have had anxiety their whole life and you may have thought they were shy or quiet or reserved. Maybe they had some behavioral tendencies that you just thought were a little bit quirky, but maybe that was anxiety, or maybe that was an OCD contributing factor related to the anxiety. But the reality is, when your child is older, when they are teens, sometimes those symptoms become impossible to ignore. It seems like something deeper is going on. It's a little bit more evident, but not always. And sometimes if we don't recognize what those symptoms are, we can't recognize the triggers. But your children, if you start noticing behavioral changes, maybe they are more irritable, maybe they're spending, and this is a tough one because I know my teen daughter is in her room all the time. But,
Mhm.
if you start to see they're less engaging, they have less desire to be with the family or have conversations, they laugh less, they interact less. Maybe they are having trouble sleeping. Maybe all of a sudden they're experiencing headaches. Maybe they have a stomach ache that is frequent or, chronic, and the doctors can't find anything wrong with them. A lot of times you can go to a primary care physician and the primary care physician will say, well, we can't find anything wrong with them, despite the fact that they ran tests and they did exams. And sometimes that is actually anxiety manifesting in the physical body.
Mhm.
And our brain and our bodies are, so I know you know all this, Sarah, the scientific component of it, that our brain and body is so intimately connected. And so those symptoms will manifest in the body. And when you start to see some of these changes in behavior, it's important to ask, especially if there is no physical diagnosis to accompany them, what is going on in their life? When are we seeing these symptoms? When are we seeing these changes in behavior? When do they escalate?
Mhm.
And you'll start to be able to recognize, like, oh, they have a test this week and they had a test last week when they behaved this way. Or maybe there's a social thing coming up and that's triggering their anxiety, and you're seeing this. Maybe it's their sports, and it could be in a number of things. It could be relationships, it could be something going on inside your home that is triggering them. But you'll start to see these, if you take the care to try to map it out, like, and identify the patterns in behaviors, because the more you do that, the more you're going to be able to identify the triggers. And then what happens, if you can identify the triggers, you can create a strategy so that instead of these behaviors getting worse and they're blowing up, or they're being disrespectful to you, or they're harming themselves, or whatever the case may be. And when I say harming themselves, it doesn't have to necessarily be physical harm. But the more they're feeling this way, the more negative they're talking to themselves inside their own mind. That's damaging long term. And
Mhm.
then, but it could be too that they're hurting themselves because they're not able to maintain relationships, or they're isolating themselves. And, all of those things can cause additional harm later in life. So if you can start to identify what those triggers are and then create a strategy. Okay, we know you have a test coming up this week. So how are we going to work together to keep the anxiety levels down? What work can we do to keep you focused on the positive of having this test versus focusing on the what ifs? What if I fail? What if I don't get the A that I need? What if, my instructor doesn't like me? What if, and this goes from teenagers all the way through adult children. I have two adult sons who are, there's grad school and college, but you still see these things escalate. You can call them on the phone and you hear it in their voice. Oh, what do you have this week? And get curious about what it is that you're noticing in their behavior, not calling them out as, oh, you sound grumpy, or, oh, you sound irritable, but hey, what do you have this week? What's going on this week? And let them bring to the surface what it is that's troubling them. And then maybe you can guide them on some of those strategies that either you've worked on previously, or maybe they're new, but it's bringing them back to, okay, I can get through this, and here's how I'm going to get through it, instead of letting their mind spiral in negative, anxious thoughts or what if thoughts.
Well, this is a new idea and a new concept as far as our generation, right? And we talked about, previous generations and our parents' generations. It was just kind of like, get over it, deal with it, drink it away, scream it away, fight it away, right? It was just this idea that you just man up, stuff it down, man up. And I think we really come to a reckoning. There's a lot of young people now who are experiencing so much anxiety, they're not entering the workplace. There's kind of this joke about the child in the basement. But as a culture of humans, we're all gonna have to learn these strategies. We're all gonna have to, it used to feel optional when you could kind of like tell someone else man up and it was their problem. It felt like optional. But I read recently that 7 million men, 24 to 56 were not working.
Wow. I hadn't seen that, but what I have seen are some of the statistics around even men feeling insecure, not capable, not intelligent, not good at their job. And it's funny because, we have such a male bashing culture, especially older white men, that we bash all the time. But so I found those statistics really interesting, that they actually do struggle, not as much as women, but I thought it was interesting that they do struggle too.
Well, I have a son. You have a son. I mean, 2 sons, right? It's like, I don't want him. I have a son and a daughter. I don't want either of them to struggle, to say, well, it's not as bad for my son as it is for my daughter. That seems odd, right? As good parents, as good people, if we have a male employee and a female employee, the good in the world is we hope no one struggles with anxiety in an ideal situation, right? Not that we only worry about a certain population. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, our sons are facing a lot more challenges these days too, because there's so much more pressure on them to perform and be the best, because everything's so much more competitive. There's also so many social demands for them as well, to behave a certain way or act a certain way, or this could happen or that could happen. And there are so many pressures on girls and boys alike, that it's, when we went to school, and if we were driven, we did great. But if you weren't that high achieving driven person, you got into college and everything was fine. And there wasn't this pressure to perform at extreme levels and to get into the best school so that you can get the best job. What happened to trades? I'm a big fan of, if a kid is unsure what their future looks like, give them the opportunity to explore for a little bit. Don't send them straight away to an expensive 4-year college, because all that does is increase the anxiety. So there are ways that we can help our kids if they already are struggling with anxiety. Let's not push them into more scenarios that are only going to cause the risk to elevate. for further anxiety, because then anytime that happens, then we have the risk escalates in terms of how are they going to cope with this anxiety when they're not in your presence. And it's drugs, it's alcohol, it's eating disorders. And all of those things have the potential to lead to, them wanting to end their life. And so it's really important to take a step back. And I always say, let's get curious instead of judging, or even to try to walk in their shoes, and I know that we talked, and a lot of your audience is empathetic. I am an empath. And so I understand that. And it's very easy to coddle our children and want to keep them close to us, but that really doesn't help them because they don't learn how to navigate situations. So if we can instead get curious as to how they're feeling and explore the best path for them to be able to make decisions with us, maybe guiding them, but not dictating what those decisions are, right? And then let them kind of collectively with you explore what the options are and how this is going to work when they're technically on their own.
And I think even just the simple practice of walking your child through a schedule for a week, or walking them through the day, or walking them through like, okay, this is what's expected. This is what you're going to need. This is what I'm going to pick you up. This is just like that, like process of, if you can start that earlier, so that when they're 25, they're doing their own thought, they're doing that themselves rather than like, oh, I forgot this, and I forgot I had this, and I forgot I had, it's just there's some anxiety that we can control, right? Like not leaving, getting all the groceries ahead of time before you start making dinner, and then you realize you don't have any, tomatoes, right? And then there's some anxieties we cannot control, like a college admissions process, certain job hires, health issues within a family, certain in school, social groups,
a breakup. Like there's so many things that could be thrown at our kids, right? My oldest son struggled with anxiety, and when he was, because of his anxiety, he also had OCD, and his method of managing stress, navigating his anxiety was to run. And so he would run, he wanted to run marathons. So by the time he was 17, he ran 2 marathons, but that meant that our entire world revolved around him getting his runs in to train. And at one point we had scheduled this just incredible vacation, and we had to cancel it because he wasn't going to be able to run. Now I say we had to cancel it, and really I shouldn't say that at all, because we had a choice. We chose the easy way out so that we wouldn't have to deal with fits because he couldn't run. So we made the decision to go someplace where he could run, and we could say, okay, safely go for a run, versus being in the mountains or being, in a lot of places unknown that may not be safe for him to go run. So, but I would strongly encourage people not to do that, because in doing that, you're sending them the message that, okay, we're your doormat. We're going to do whatever it takes to make you happy, versus saying, you know what, there's more to our family than you, and we want to be happy too. So how can we work together to navigate this situation? And,
I need to stop right there. I want to scream that to the rooftops. Okay. And in my family, we talk about whose turn is it at the top of the pyramid. So in a healthy family structure, like you each get a turn at the top of the pyramid. If it was Johnny hit a home run, he gets to pick dinner, right? If it's Susie's birthday, she gets to pick, what kind of cake you have, right? We understand the concept, right? But if you get in a situation, and mamas, if you were always at the bottom of the pyramid, you are either teaching your daughters that her job is to be at the bottom of the pyramid, or you're teaching your sons that his job is to get a girl who's going to be at the bottom of the pyramid all the time. Like, it is very bad. I've said many things about it, but I'll say it again, because then we can get in this whole idea, well, I'm selfish if I this, or I'm selfish if I that. And it's like, it can feel really uncomfortable to put yourself out there. But, one of my favorite questions to ask women who do that and their daughters, they're always at the bottom of the pyramid and their daughters are always, and I say, oh, so at what point does your daughter expire? And there, she's like, what? I said, well, you're teaching her that women are always at the bottom of the pyramid. So at what point does your daughter expire? Because now she's at the top of the pyramid. But obviously at some point you think she's going back to the bottom. No, I don't think that. I was like, then you're asking her to be the cycle breaker. Right? There is nothing
Absolutely.
selfless or martyring or nice or giving or whatever. It is not good. So I had to stop you on that point. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it is,
No.
because sometimes we need, especially if we've been like indoctrinated to think, if I do anything for myself, I'm a bad person, or should be, the ideal mother is martyr mother, right? And it's like martyr mothers create terrible humans.
Mhm.
They are selfish. They don't, right? And I'm not saying you're a martyr mother, but I know you get a person.
Well, no, not at all. Not at all. But I think a lot of times moms do things out of desperation, right? You try to save peace for the entire unit, the entire family unit. But if you don't care for yourself, you can't care for them. And, like we joke at my house because it's not my birthday, it's my birth month. Like we celebrate all January, all month long. It's about me. And, it's like, but my kids know, like they see a concert come up and they're like, hey mom, did you see so-and-so's in concert? You want to go? You need to teach your kids, like they need to see that you matter. You need to teach them to put other people first. And if you're constantly putting yourself on the back end, they're never going to learn that, oh, you know what? Everybody gets a turn to shine. Yes. Everybody gets a turn to have respect. Everybody needs this. We can't do it alone. I mean, and if we don't teach our children these things, then we are going to be alone and we're going to be stuck forever at the bottom. But, I have a philosophy and I really believe that every single thing in our life is determined by the choices we make. You and I could both be presented with the exact same situation. And we can look at that situation one way or the other. The situation itself is neutral. It isn't good. It isn't bad. It's, not awful or whatever, but our belief around that situation, which is then going to trigger our thoughts around the situation, which will then influence how we respond emotionally. And those emotions then determine what our behaviors are. So if we, and then our outcomes are a result of that. So if we look at situations and we think, oh, this is awful, then, if we believe that I'm a victim because of this situation, or my child's a victim because of this situation, we're going to go down that negative pathway. And the result is not going to be good. It's not going to be present or, what's the right word I'm trying to say? It's not going to be good. And, it could potentially be damaging versus if you look at a situation and you think, oh, okay, so this happened. Now, how are we going to address this? How can I, knowing that I have strength, I have resiliency, I have perseverance, this situation isn't going to break me. Nobody did this to me. This is an opportunity for me to learn. And then take those thoughts and transfer those to feeling confident, feeling inspired, feeling motivated, feeling the energy to want to educate your child or to help your child navigate this situation, to see the positive versus seeing the negative. Because then what's going to happen is you're going to have more positive outcomes. You're going to have more positive results. And even not getting into a college, okay, that process is so anxiety provoking, but if you don't get into the college of your choice, chances are there's a reason something better is going to come your way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm glad you said that about the positive and the negative. And I know you mentioned in your book, you, me, and anxiety, we'll talk about it at the end, but, and our brains, the negative, scarier things are stickier.
Yes.
Than the positive things, right? And so I think there's kind of some belief that's like, well, maybe this should just magically happen, or maybe some people it's easier for others and some of those things. But like all humans, this is true for all humans, is that, our brains are designed to keep us safe, not make us happy. So we are all going to see danger and look out for danger in a different way than joy. Because
Mhm,
joy doesn't keep us alive.
mhm.
Avoiding danger keeps us alive.
Yeah. And
Anxiety, anxiety, anxiety.
this goes all the way back to when, people were cavemen and
Right.
they had to be aware of all of their surroundings, and
Mhm.
bad things did happen and they didn't have the mechanisms to deal with them or fight them off or whatever. They had to be on alert all the time. And it's in the amygdala, which is in the limbic part of the brain, if you want to get technical. But
Mhm.
we automatically have that negativity bias. Our brains are more likely to see things as negative, and they're more likely to hold on to the negative than to hold on to the positive. And that's why we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. And in the book, I talk about my 5 C's of journaling method. And, if we can catch those negative thoughts and then challenge them, and this is a great exercise that you can do if your child is showing signs and symptoms of anxiety, no matter their age, no matter their, where they are in the course of their journey, is okay, are those thoughts rational? Now, they may get mad at you when you ask these questions, but the more you practice this with them, the more they're going to understand this is a really great way to approach different situations in life, and it's a tool that they can then take with them on every aspect of their life journey. But challenge those negative thoughts, or what if thoughts. Is this rational? Could this be held up in a court of law? Is this realistic at all? Would someone that I know, love, and respect think this way about me? And if the answer to any of those questions is no, then it's time to change those thoughts. Now, how can you change those thoughts? Well, if you've got a negative thought or a what if thought, transfer that over to something positive. But the more you write the positive, you write the opposite, the more you're going to change those neural pathways in your brain. The more you start to do that, the more control you'll have over your thoughts. You'll start to have more positive thoughts than negative thoughts. Your brain will start to look more towards the positive versus immediately going to negative. And then when that happens, you start to have more confidence. Now, if you have a diagnosis of clinical anxiety, chances are that's something you're going to have to navigate the rest of your life. It's not just going to go away by doing this exercise one time. This is something that you need to do daily. It's consistent action that helps you navigate anxiety. And that's a really important thing for people to recognize, is that there are ways to navigate it. There aren't necessarily ways to make it go away completely. You can certainly reduce it, but the important thing is just to be able to recognize, okay, this is my trigger, and here's the strategy I'm going to use. And if for some reason those negative thoughts get stuck, then this is what I can do to get through those negative thoughts. But the more you do that exercise, the more you're going to be able to make decisions and live a purposeful, peaceful life.
So the strategies you're talking about, I mean, sometimes it's asking yourself those questions, like, is it true? Could it be held up in the court of law? Sometimes it's looking kind of awareness and figuring out where the trigger is. What are some other strategies that you like to incorporate?
I love this. So, first and foremost, sleep is absolutely critical for navigating anxiety. Our bodies
I'm
need.
going to make that sentence shorter. Sleep is critical. If the world started bragging about how early they went to bed rather than how late they went to bed, the mental health problems, the relationship problems that you're snapping at your kid, you made a mistake at work, like, it is the magic pill. You want a magic pill? Go to sleep.
Sleep.
Thank you.
I mean, it literally is. I literally
Yes.
just interviewed a sleep expert on my podcast, and it is
Yes.
so important for
Yes.
everything, for your
For
mental
everything.
health, physical health,
Yes.
everything, your
Losing weight.
behavior,
Losing
everything.
weight. Yes. It was
It's
like I was
sleep.
reading. Yes. Yeah. It's like Alzheimer's, aging, cancer. It's like, come on. It's the only magic pill. I'll
Mhm.
say that's the only magic
Yeah.
pill.
Yeah, it's sleep. Okay. And I love sleep. Like, that's the one thing, like, I'm very dedicated to my sleep. Okay. So sleep, exercise is so important. Movement is medicine for your mind. And I don't mean you have to go do high impact aerobics or some extreme workout. Take a walk, get in touch with nature, tap into your creativity. That's another one, creativity. Let your mind just kind of explore. And the more sleep you have, the more healthy food, whole foods you eat, organic whole foods that nourish your mind and your body. That's important. And that's going to stimulate, help your mind be able to be more creative as well. And then, you tap into that creativity and it really does reduce anxiety. Get a hobby, or get a coloring book to start with. If you don't feel creative, every single one of us was born with creativity, but because of the chaos of life, it gets stifled. Bring that back to the forefront because it truly is a release for anxiety. For me, faith has been a big component for navigating anxiety, prayer, reading scripture. I love Philippians 4:13. I can do anything through him who gives me strength. So if I'm feeling like I'm in that negative cycle, I can just tap into that and say, okay, you know what? I don't have to fight this by myself. I've got God on my side and I can help. It just kind of resets me. Let's see gratitude. To me, that is a huge one because when our brain is so focused on the what ifs or the negative things, and if something bad happens, instead of looking at it as that happened to me, what if we switch that to say, okay, where is the blessing in this? And I'm so glad that didn't happen. And now I learned this. And so tapping into gratitude, I think, is really important for helping your brain see more positive versus negative. And sometimes at the end of the day, like I always recommend, try to write down 3 things you're grateful for at the end of every single day. So in the morning, you want to journal and get all that negative gook out onto paper and change it to positive so you can open up your mind to see what the opportunities can be, what the possibilities are for the day. But at night, reflect back. And instead of looking at it as, nothing good happened today. The washing machine broke. My kid didn't get into college, whatever. The car broke down. Look at it as, okay, what did go well? We have food on our table. We have a roof over our head. I have a pen in my hand that I can write on this piece of paper. All these little tiny things, if we can start to focus on the little benefits or, the car broke down, but well, thank God I wasn't in the car 200 miles from home and stuck, or thank God the washing machine broke, but it didn't break and flood my whole house. And now I have to repair 2 rooms. There's always a benefit that you can find. And the more we try to do that, the less anxiety is going to have control over our mind. Now I used examples there that are more like adult oriented, but you can come up with the same type of examples for your kids.
Every night when my kids go to sleep, because there's a book called The Thinking Person's Guide to Joy that I read years and years and years ago. And it said the quickest happiness hack is thinking of 3 things, the 3 best things that happen to you before you go to bed at night. Yeah. So that's a practice I've done with my children for years and years and years. Like it's bedtime. Well, my son's a little too old for me to put him to bed at this point, but it's like when I'm tucking my daughter in, and for years, his whole elementary school years, it was like, what are the 3 best things that happened today? What are the 3 best things that happened today? Before they go into that subconscious sleep. And if my kids are in a real tizzy before school, I'll make them say 3 things they're grateful for before they get out of the car to try to reset. So before,
that's great. Yeah, well, you can also do that at dinner time. Like if it, for the kids that are older, like when our kids were in high school, we would have those conversations around the dinner table versus having them at night, before bed. Cause at that point, when the boys were teenagers, they did not want me in their room at nighttime.
No.
It was like good night through the door,
Yeah. It would be very weird now. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, those are a few other things. And then, like I said, my journaling, the journaling practice is something that I recommend highly. We know that our brains respond to journaling the same way it responds to meditation. And meditation is a great tool as well, but it's not for everyone. I struggle with meditation, but I could sit down and journal for hours on end. That's how I get my release. But journaling changes the neural pathways of the brain the same way that meditation does. Breathing is another one. If you can, it works for some people that are really, really anxious, that breathing can, stimulate more of a panic attack or something. So they don't do breathing exercises as well. But if you are able to do breathing exercises, take a deep breath in, take a second deep breath in and hold it for 4 to 6 seconds and then exhale. When you exhale, you actually lower your heart rate. So it's a great way to calm yourself if you can do that. So, the one thing that I would say, Sarah, is the way our brains work. And we talked about the negativity bias. And I use this example in the book. And I think this may help parents especially who have older children, to think about this, the image of when people have anxiety, the brain doesn't stop the track, it's like a hiccup happens. So I use the example of a Ferris wheel where, when you get on the Ferris wheel, it's going slow and then it lets more people on and it keeps going slow for a little bit. And then once everybody's on, it starts going really fast. Eventually it slows down and it lets people off. But if you think of it, lets negative thoughts on and it just keeps going. And more negative thoughts get on, more negative thoughts get on, and it's just spinning in circles out of control, right? And it's not stopping and slowing down for negative thoughts to go out and positive thoughts to come in. That's what's happening with anxiety. It's like a hiccup in your brain where it just can't stop to let the negative go and the positive come. And that's where, if your kid is really struggling, it could be that they need medication. It could be that they need therapy. And there is no shame in that whatsoever. We're humans and none of us are perfect. And there's no blame either. It's not that, it's your fault. The fact of the matter is that scientifically there's epigenetics and things are passed down from generation to generation to generation. But if your grandmother experienced trauma, that trauma is still trickling down to your child. So take yourself out of that scenario and focus on, okay, what can we do to just get the help we need? And maybe it starts with therapy, maybe that's not going to work alone. Maybe a combination with medication is what's going to be needed for, say, 6 months. But the thing is being consistent with whatever you're doing for at least 6 months. We know that that's kind of the magic mark to then be able to navigate going forward.
Great information. Great information. So tell people where they can get your book, You, Me, and Anxiety, Take Action Over Anxiety to Joy Being You. You have a parent and teen edition, right?
Yes, and there's a journal too. So in the book, I break out different activities and all of those can be utilized in the journal. So you can do them side by side as you read the book. You can go to youmeandanxiety.com to access the book. It's available on Amazon or, wherever you buy books.
Awesome. Well, Robin, thank you so much for helping us on our journey to becoming toxic person proof.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. It was